I thought I was walking into a lifetime of love and vows. Instead, I was dragged into the arms of a man who terrified the world, but inexplicably held the key to my survival. Billionaire Adrian Blackwood didn't kidnap me for ransom. He kidnapped me to reveal the truth, my fiancé's betrayals, captured in unforgiving photographs, and a life I'd been too blind to see. But the danger didn't end there. Because the man who held me in his fortress wasn't my enemy or my savior. He was a storm, a force of nature, a temptation I wasn't prepared for, and a darkness that promised to destroy everything I thought I knew about love, trust, and desire. Welcome to 15 Minutes Binge Romance, your new guilty pleasure. Here, we don't waste a single second. I drop you into the tension, the danger, and the bad decisions you know you'd never make, but love hearing about. Ready for your next binge? Good. Let's go. Part 1. The morning I was supposed to be married started like every other day in my carefully constructed little world, sunlight spilling over silk sheets, the scent of roses on the windowsill, my phone buzzing with last-minute instructions. But then the chapel doors opened behind me, and hands gripped my arms with iron certainty. The rest of my life vanished in a blink. I screamed, but the sound was swallowed by something more powerful than fear, control. They threw me into the back of a black car, cold leather seats pressing against my skin. My veil, my gown, even my ring, became meaningless. The world I knew, the one with laughter, love, and promises, was gone. The driver never spoke. The hands that held me never wavered. And then he appeared. Adrian Blackwood. His name alone carries stories of power, danger, and ruin. His eyes, dark as midnight storms, swept over me like a verdict. He didn't introduce himself. He didn't need to. I knew who he was from whispered rumors and headlines that painted him as untouchable, ruthless, untamed. Yet the way he looked at me, calm, measured, like he already owned the truth of me, shook something deep inside me. He handed me a tablet. My fingers shook, my mind refusing to process. The images on the screen were a hammer to my chest. Daniel, my fiancé, the man I had pledged my life to, was naked, entangled with another woman. A date stamp confirmed it wasn't a past mistake. This was ongoing. My stomach dropped. The floor beneath me disappeared. He's been lying, my mind whispered, over and over. The betrayal was physical, tangible, a knife turned in every memory I'd built with him. Adrian watched silently as I absorbed the truth. Not a flicker of triumph in his expression. Just study. Precision. Then the words, I found out 2 years ago. He never stopped. He planned to marry you anyway. My hands clawed at the tablet. Why show me this? My voice trembled between anger and despair. He leaned back, legs crossed, voice calm. Because no one else would tell you. No one else would make you see the man you thought you knew. And you were about to sign your life away to a lie. We didn't speak again for the long stretch of the drive. I stared at the city rushing past, each building a reminder of everything I was losing. Adrian didn't touch me, didn't restrain me beyond the initial hold, and that in itself was terrifying. The lack of force made the captivity worse. It made it choice and truth, all in one. I wanted to scream, to fight, to throw myself against the door, but the certainty in his presence pressed me into silence. The compound he took me to was isolated and vast, perched on cliffs that jutted over a restless sea. Glass and steel gleamed in the sun, but the air was heavy with tension. Guards moved like shadows, silent, efficient, loyal. Inside, Adrian finally spoke. Don't try to leave, he said. The gates are biometric. The guards are loyal. And I don't want to hurt you. I was furious. You already have. I snapped. His expression didn't change. I hurt you to stop something worse, he said, almost casually. My chest tightened. And what is worse than your kidnapping? His eyes darkened. A life spent with a man who never deserved you. Days passed. Or hours. I lost track of time. I barely ate. I barely slept. I existed in the space between anger, grief, and the magnetic force of Adrian's presence. He appeared often, never crowding me, observing, speaking only when necessary, challenging me in ways no one else had dared. His world was structured, meticulous, and terrifyingly clear, and yet, when he looked at me, it felt like the chaos of my emotions was something he not only understood but respected. One night, I finally asked, "Why do you care?" "Because you saved my life once," he said. I frowned, confused. What? A slow recollection settled in my chest like ice. Years ago, I had testified in a case that implicated his father, a man feared for his cruelty. I had spoken truth in court, unknowingly destabilizing the power that dominated his life. He'd remembered. And now, standing before me, he was telling me he had never forgotten. He didn't apologize. He didn't rationalize. He only watched, patiently, as my disbelief tangled with the pain of betrayal and the rising tension between us. It was intoxicating. Dangerous. I hated him for this magnetism that twisted my emotions, even as he was the very man who had shattered everything I believed about love and safety. The storm came weeks later. Daniel discovered our location, showing up at the gates in the rain, voice raw, drenched, desperate. He swore it was a misunderstanding, that it had meant nothing, that he loved me. Adrian handed me the phone. "Call him out," he said, giving me the choice. I stepped forward, the rain washing the last traces of my illusions from me, and told Daniel the truth. I knew, I had seen, I would never forgive. His world crumbled in front of me, and I realized with shocking clarity that the man who had kidnapped me was also the one man capable of protecting me from deceit and the one I couldn't stop noticing, even in the shadow of fury. Later, after Daniel's retreat, the house was quiet but not empty. I confronted Adrian. "You manipulated everything," I said, voice steady now with controlled rage. He nodded. "Yes. But I did not lie. I gave you reality." And then, for the first time, he allowed a trace of vulnerability to surface. "I never planned to want you like this," he admitted. Desire hung between us like a live wire. I stepped closer, daring, reckless, and the kiss that followed shattered the restraint between us. His lips were claiming, yet patient, waiting for consent even as he ignited something primal and undeniable within me. When I pulled back, breathless, he whispered, "Choose me, or walk away." I chose him. Part 2. The first morning after, the world felt foreign and fragile. Light spilled across the glass walls of Adrian's fortress, but the reality outside seemed distant, almost unreal. I was alive, I was free from lies, yet I wasn't untouched. Adrian moved around me not like a captor, not like an intruder, but like a man who had quietly made space for me in a life I never thought I could enter. His presence was suffocating and liberating at once. I hated and wanted him in the same breath. I hated that I wanted him. He poured coffee without a word. The rich aroma filled the kitchen, but it couldn't mask the tension between us. My gown, wrinkled from the drive, clung uncomfortably to my body. He noticed, naturally. His gaze lingered, measuring, and I felt the familiar prickle of unease, the pull of attraction mixed with the fear of surrender. "You're quiet this morning," he observed, voice low, unhurried. "Processing?" I wanted to snap at him, to claim anger as my shield, but I didn't. I nodded instead. "Processing everything," I admitted. He leaned against the counter, arms crossed, studying me. The silence stretched, a taut wire ready to snap. I felt my pulse race, a heartbeat echoing in my ears, loud enough to drown out the soft hum of the city below. "You don't have to answer now," he said. "Just take your time." His words were gentle, almost fragile, but the intensity in his gaze was undeniable. I looked away, trying to breathe. It was absurd. A man who kidnapped me, terrified me, and yet, he had earned my trust in ways no one else could. Breakfast passed with minimal words. I watched him, noting the subtleties, the slight curve of his jaw when he was deep in thought, the way his fingers brushed the marble countertop, the restrained power in every movement. I realized with a jolt that I was studying him the way a soldier studies an enemy. Only Adrian wasn't an enemy. Not entirely. He was something more dangerous. Something I couldn't categorize, couldn't contain. Days blurred into a strange rhythm. Adrian didn't force me into his world. He guided, challenged, tempted, and terrified me, all in equal measure. He didn't tolerate lies, and he didn't accept illusions. Each conversation, each glance, each brush of skin carried weight. Every word was a test, every pause a lesson. I learned more about myself in those silent mornings and tense nights than I had in years of carefully curated social circles and polite smiles. I began to see the fractures in my own assumptions, the cracks I had ignored for the sake of convenience. I discovered his complexity in layers. Adrian Blackwood wasn't a villain, at least not in the simple sense. He was a man shaped by power, danger, and loss. He bore darkness, yes, but he bore it with a precision that fascinated and terrified me. One evening, after a storm that shook the cliffs beneath the compound, I found him sitting by the panoramic windows, rain streaking the glass. He didn't flinch as I approached, didn't invite conversation, but I felt the unspoken pressure of his presence. "You're thinking too much," he said finally, breaking the silence without turning. His voice was calm, measured, but the subtext was razor-sharp. "I always think too much," I replied, and he finally looked at me, eyes dark, unreadable. "You're learning," he said simply. And in those 3 words, I felt both rebuke and admiration. He was relentless, even in his subtlety. Then the tension escalated in ways I hadn't anticipated. Desire, slow-burning and inevitable, began to pull me toward him with a force I couldn't resist. Nights became restless. The moments we shared, even in silence, were charged with a dangerous electricity. I hated that he could make my pulse race with a single look. I hated that my thoughts wandered to him when I tried to focus on anything else. I hated how alive I felt when he was near. And yet, hate and longing were entwined so completely that I couldn't separate them. The breakthrough came unexpectedly. A casual touch, just his fingers brushing mine as he handed me a document. My breath caught, and I realized I wanted more. So much more. I turned to him, searching his face, and found the same desire reflected there, controlled, precise, but undeniably present. He stepped closer, the air between us thick with tension. "You can't fight it," he said softly, the words more confession than observation. "Not what's between us." I laughed, bitter and nervous, anger and desire mingling in equal measure. "You kidnapped me," I said. "Manipulated me. And now you tell me I'm yours." The words were harsh, but the truth was that I already wanted him, feared him, needed him. He didn't flinch. He simply tilted his head, dark eyes unreadable. "I didn't manipulate your heart," he corrected. "I gave you the truth and let you choose. I never lied about what I felt." And then, the kiss. It was not tentative. It was confession, revelation, surrender. Every nerve ending ignited, every doubt, fear, and fury exploding into a single, consuming fire. I felt months of tension unraveling as his lips crushed mine, claiming and demanding, yet patient in ways that defied logic. When he finally pulled back, breathless, he whispered, "You chose. And I'll keep choosing you, every day." Weeks passed, a delicate negotiation of boundaries and passion. The intensity never waned. Desire burned, tempered by respect and the shared understanding that neither of us could ever settle for illusions. Adrian's darkness was not a threat to be feared but a challenge to be understood. And I, in turn, was learning to embrace my own power, my own agency, without apology. Then came the revelation I hadn't anticipated. While exploring his archives, searching for clues about Daniel, I stumbled upon evidence that the photographs, the evidence of betrayal, were only part of a larger, calculated plan. Adrian had been orchestrating a quiet investigation into Daniel for years, tracking every lie, every indiscretion. My heartbreak had been only a fragment of a truth far greater than my personal betrayal. The realization hit me like a physical blow. He had used the situation to protect not only me but others ensnared by Daniel's deceptions. I confronted him immediately. "You used me," I accused, though the words felt weak against the magnitude of what I was discovering. His expression was calm, even distant. "I gave you the truth," he said. "I ensured you would never be trapped in a life built on lies. That was my only objective." The rational part of me understood, but the raw, emotional side flared anger, fear, and undeniable attraction warring within me. We spent the night talking, unraveling layers of deception, fear, and protection. Each revelation brought new understanding of Adrian, each admission tightening the bond between us. I realized he wasn't perfect, not in the conventional sense. He had orchestrated a kidnapping, manipulated events, and used my heartbreak as leverage, but he had done it for the sake of truth, not vengeance. The complexity was overwhelming. And yet, amidst the chaos, desire remained. It was undeniable, unrelenting, and beautifully raw. I no longer felt the need to guard myself against it. I allowed myself to lean into him, to let him see every nuance of my pain, my fear, my longing. He responded in kind, patient and commanding, a paradox that both terrified and exhilarated me. One evening, he took my hand and led me to the cliffs overlooking the ocean. The wind tore at our clothes, whipped at our hair, and yet I felt anchored, inexplicably grounded, in his presence. "Do you understand now?" he asked, voice soft but firm. "Why I did all of this?" I nodded, tears pricking the corners of my eyes. "I think I do," I whispered. "And I think I understand you, more than I ever wanted to." He smiled, the first genuine curve of lips that had always seemed half smile, half threat. "You are stronger than you know," he said. "And you are mine, only because you chose it." The words wrapped around me like a vow, dangerous and binding. I felt the heat of his body as he drew closer, the magnetic pull undeniable. Our kiss this time was different, no chaos, no frenzy, just two souls colliding, raw and unafraid, surrendering fully to desire and trust. Months passed. The world outside continued its indifferent march, but inside the fortress, time was ours. Adrian and I navigated the intricacies of power, trust, and desire, building a life that was both fragile and unbreakable. We were partners, in every sense, equal, challenged, yet wholly devoted. He was not a hero. He was not perfect. He was dangerous, dark, and intoxicating. And I loved him with every fragment of my heart that had survived betrayal and chaos. Finally, the past fell away. Daniel was gone from my life, a distant memory of betrayal and heartbreak. I had confronted him, exposed the truth, and walked away without looking back. I realized that the man who had once kidnapped me, who had terrified me with his power and precision, had become my protector, my equal, and the only man I would ever trust fully. In Adrian's arms, I discovered the paradox of love that is simultaneously safe and dangerous, grounding and consuming. The darkness he carried was no longer a threat, it was a force we shared, a fire that warmed and illuminated us. We were complete in a way that defied convention, a love forged in deception, truth, and raw, undeniable desire. On the night we finally surrendered fully to each other, standing together on the cliffs overlooking the stormy ocean, I felt the full weight of what had happened. The betrayal I had endured, the fear, the kidnapping, all of it led to this moment. I wrapped my arms around Adrian, pressed my face against his chest, and let myself feel everything without restraint. He held me, steady and unflinching, and whispered, "You chose me. And I will choose you, every day for the rest of our lives." I believed him. The world would never understand the depth of our connection. They would never know the truth of the chaos, the fear, the passion, and the redemption. But we didn't need their understanding. We had each other. And in that knowledge, I found peace, desire, and the fierce, consuming joy of a love that had been tested, broken, and ultimately reborn. Sometimes, I think back to that morning when the chapel doors opened and my life shifted forever. The world I had known vanished in an instant, replaced by danger, revelation, and the dark, intoxicating figure of Adrian Blackwood. I had been stolen, yes, but in being taken, I had found freedom, the freedom to see clearly, to choose deliberately, to love without compromise. He is not perfect. He never claimed to be. But in his imperfections, in the shadows he carries, I found the man I had been waiting for my entire life without knowing it. I learned that love is not always gentle. It is sometimes storm, fire, and darkness. It is dangerous and consuming. And when it is true, when it is built on the raw foundation of honesty, desire, and mutual respect, it is indestructible. Adrian and I stand on the edge of our world now, hands entwined, hearts synchronized, eyes locked on a horizon that promises nothing easy, nothing predictable, but everything real. The past is behind us. Daniel's betrayal is a ghost we no longer fear. And the world outside, its judgments, its whispers, its assumptions, has no power over what we have built in these walls. I breathe in the ocean air, taste the salt and freedom, and realize something I should have understood all along. To find the life and love you deserve, sometimes you must surrender to the chaos, trust the darkness, and allow yourself to be taken. Only then can you truly be free. And I am free. I am his. And he is mine. Together, we are unshakable. Together, we are fire. Together, we are everything. Another 15 minutes, gone just like that. If you're already craving the next episode, don't fight it, there's plenty more billionaire chaos where this came from. Hit that follow, and meet me in the next story. Trust me, it only gets juicier from here.